There's an extremely offensive stereotype made about the British that we love talking about the weather, which is completely wrong, okay? We don't love talking about the weather. It actually turns us on.
Could you tell us, and could you describe again, the shape of your favourite cloud and what it is?
It's a mammatus cloud, so it's bulbous. You know, you can't hold it in your hand, obviously it's a cloud, but it's like that.
Okay.
Yes, we discovered a new type of cloud before everybody else and literally named it after tits. Never underestimate the British and their love for some clouds. What we're not so great at though is talking about climate change. Welcome back to the Mooncat channel. The world is on fire. So let's have a beer and talk about it. It is definitely not Tuesday afternoon. It is not Tuesday afternoon. So the 26th annual conference on what we all might do about the extinction of the human race just happened. The 26th one, which is a bit like your average Tony Robbins or Gary Vee fanboy being like,
yeah bruv, I'm off to my 26 Life Success Secret Masterminds event.
These life lessons clearly aren't teaching you anything. All you ever come home with is a few new slogans and a ticket to the next event. You still work as a fridge boy at the local Curry's. You come home and you try and fit wanks in between your mother coming into your bedroom and trying to tell you to stop getting fried chicken grease on the upholstery, and you think a picture of a half-decomposed monkey is gonna buy you a Lamborghini. They're having you on, Jeremy. So, at the wildly successful COP26, Biden saw the shriveled up dick of a Scotsman on the side of the road, then farted on Camilla before falling asleep, and our very own Bojo, looking like an albino Mr. Potato Head perched atop a pile of old pillows stuffed in a suit and drawn by a child, appeared to fall asleep maskless next to the 94-year-old David Attenborough. And Obama somehow confused Scotland for both Ireland and England at the same time. It was a bit like an extremely extravagant state-funded field trip for a care home where they forgot all of the medication. And it's funny until you realise that all of these old peoples can make decisions about your future. It's a bit like being nailed to a chair in a furnace and your nan's outside it next to the off switch, but all she's doing is going buck wild on your Tinder account. Our possibly dead head of state gave a televised speech. Oh, she's wearing that green dress again. Editing Mooncat. Don't do it. What? I'm not gonna... Don't do it.
In the coming days, the world has the chance to join in the shared objective of creating a safer, stabler future for our people.
And for the planet on which we depend.
Prince Charles was tripping over himself to give a speech. Prince Andrew gave a speech on his plans to cut his carbon footprint by only molesting locally and only eating meat feast pizzas when he needs an alibi and not taking any flights to the US for any reason. Ever. And then we had special appearances from the people in the world who work the hardest, much more hard than anybody else. The people who, one, work, the billionaires.
I was told that seeing the Earth from space changes the lens through which you view the world. But I was not prepared for just how much that would be true.
It's beautiful because he was viewing it through a bellend. In fact, climate change is basically like one huge worldwide game of soggy biscuits. All countries are jerking their CO2 onto this one biscuit, the Earth, and then the last countries to develop their emissions quickly enough have to eat the consequences.
I'm gonna come.
A social movement has been developing against the diabolically poor actions made by the governments following each and every pointless climate summit we've had since the 90s. One man travelled all the way to Glasgow in a huge hamster ball to show how humans can all, like, work together to stop climate change or something?
Some people here write, stop to put many animals into a cave.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Stop to put many animals into a cave.
Stop putting many animals in a cave. Well, to be honest, if things on Earth go to shit, I have considered living out my life as an anarcho-primitive cat hoarder. And I guess I would have to keep a cap on how many cats I could fit into my cave. Bullshit.
How dare you?
Now, look, I love quirky, cringy, artistic people. I sing songs about capitalism on the internet, for fuck's sake. I'm one of you. And I love that they care about something so important. But for this kind of thing, for getting across to the general public, it's just not enticing, is it? Like, your average exhausted minimum wage worker isn't going to want to give up their day off to join your vegetable hokey cokey. This is the kind of thing that they probably hallucinate after a 12-hour night shift on the fresh produce aisle in Tesco. This only serves to alienate people from a movement which desperately needs more people to be a part of it. And the media is not helping. Extinction Rebellion is the largest group of climate activists in the UK. In September this year, they staged a fully naked demonstration in various branches of HSBC. The whole naked stand-in being a total of 4 minutes long until they move on to the next branch. And this one guy doesn't even take off his boxer shorts. I mean, I never thought I'd say this about a dude with male pattern baldness and a ponytail and socks and sandals on, but come on, give us some sugar.
A lot of disruption has been caused here by these brave activists.
I mean, it looks to me like the people there are quite happy to reschedule their mortgage payments with nipples in their peripheral vision. They also once hired a fire engine and filled it with blood in the hopes of painting the treasury red to depict the price we're paying in blood or something. I don't know. All I ever heard about in the news was how hilariously wrong it went when they lost control of the bloodstream, so it leaked out all over the place. Story of my life. Other protests included gluing themselves to the roofs of underground trains, trying to hold up rush hour, blocking Oxford Circus in the centre of London by gluing themselves to the road, and generally holding up traffic.
And for those of you secretly wondering, yes, they do wear nappies.
Extinction Rebellion's aims are to get arrested. They want to clog up the legal system. They want to waste police time. They want to annoy the general public because they think that's what will make the government listen. They once blocked London Bridge with a bus, and it just looks like a hen party that got out of hand.
Tracy, I think you ordered too many strippers.
And what the fuck is going on here? Like, this isn't Burning Man. You're on a roundabout in a London suburb in the pissing rain. Just give him a Pepsi. Forever concerned to not appear patronising to the general public, Extinction Rebellion's Mr. Broccoli is a man who promotes a vegan lifestyle, along with all his vegetable friends. He goes on TV to get shouted at by Piers Morgan.
Peas are plant-based food.
Are you calling Piers peas?
Well, yeah.
And doesn't even rebut him when he starts just outright lying about plant-based diets.
Increasing evidence that a strict vegan diet, for example, can have bad impact on you.
You know, I think
children may end up being more stupid.
Yeah.
But what are you doing there?
Sorry, I've just got a call. That's the wrong way up. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just ruptured my spleen watching that. An offshoot of Extinction Rebellion formed recently called Insulate Britain. So the UK has a lot of old, energy inefficient housing, and Insulate Britain wants the government to roll out loft insulation so people don't have to live in fuel poverty, which is a level of poverty so dire you have to choose between heating or eating. Around 10,000 old people die per year because of this problem in one of the most developed countries in the world. They want to force the government into action, so they do this by pissing off the general public, gluing themselves to roads and causing major tailbacks. But they don't yet have the numbers for the government to really give much of a shit, so all they're really doing right now is pissing off the general public, who retaliate by blowing bagpipes at them or squirting ink in their eyes.
People are so close to being run over, it is incredible.
You are messing with children's education.
I've got kids to feed and mothers to pay.
Being visibly pulled off right now.
You understand? Don't move. Do you understand? You're causing more pollution.
I win.
And this is just turning the issue into a culture war at the worst time. The first journalists on the scene are always our friends, GB News, or the Murdoch-owned Talk Radio TV. Brendan O'Neill, in particular, loves going off on rants and then somehow manages to segue into his wishes to abuse his children, like the good old days.
And of course, the other great phrase that they love to use, in addition with the house is on fire, is that the science is irrefutable. Well, actually, the science is not irrefutable, because if you actually analyse the science is all very well up to a point, Lord Copper, but actually the predictions have always been proved to be completely and utterly wrong, completely and utterly spurious, and completely and utterly untrue.
10 seconds later.
That would be wrong, wouldn't it, to hit your children? That's not allowed anymore. No, absolutely not.
Their ultra-right Tory viewership are so fucking talked up for hating these people. And the cherry on top is that he looks like Humpty Dumpty after being dragged through divorce court by Mrs. Dumpty and left with nothing but the memories of slapping his own children into oblivion.
Do they want to risk prison? They seem to be quite intelligent. This is obviously carefully prepared, but the government needs to be one step ahead.
They'll waste their time taking interview requests on these shows because they think that this will somehow help their cause, but they're not media trained in the slightest, so they're just doing the opposite.
Because all that you're doing here is trying to build a new socialist economy. You're trying to take away the system that has generated wealth and happiness for the kind of families that you are now driving up the bills of and causing havoc for in their lives. This isn't about insulation at all, is it?
Oh, not at all. Look, I'm a mum. I didn't go to uni. I don't really understand these bigger concepts like socialism and capitalism.
Hey, Tom, I know you're desperate to get your little Tory debate lord talking points out here because you want to be the British Ben Shapiro, but I don't think Tracy here is planning to collapse the entire political system of a country and topple the powers that be to build a new socialist utopia like some kind of new age Che Guevara. She's an unemployed mum on benefits. She doesn't know what you're talking about. And Tracy, I don't blame you for not understanding the concept of capitalism, but please, if you don't know how to answer these questions, perhaps don't be the spokesperson for your group. There are politically educated people in your group, I know there are, so let them speak. Not Liam. Please, not Liam. Liam Norton is a literal charisma black hole.
Disobeying the dock is a direct response to the criminal complicity of the British legal system, and for that reason I'm choosing to disobey in the dock tomorrow. And lots of love.
He comes across as a pompous piece of shit in every interview he does, defaulting to overly catastrophic, alienating, the world is ending rhetoric to try and explain his actions.
Gluing yourself to the M25, not the best day out for you guys, was it?
No, I agree with you. It certainly wasn't the best day out.
And never explains why he hasn't insulated his own home, which I think is because he lives in social housing, but he won't say this.
But why haven't you got your home insulated yet?
Because I'm a hypocrite.
And this led to a viral moment a couple of months ago when, during a confrontation with Richard fucking Madeley on this subject, he storms off the set.
Whether my home is insulated or not doesn't change the fact that millions of people's homes aren't insulated.
Hang on a moment,
not
sorry.
Going to be. Yeah, bye.
And I understand why these people are so passionate. They're emotionally invested in the cause, as they should be, but they don't know how to speak to people who are not.
What bit of that sentence don't you understand? It means that they're going to fry to death.
But it does end up sometimes with golden moments like this.
How is it sustainable if you're killing trees?
Because it's regenerative, you can grow trees.
Right. Well, you can grow all sorts of things, can't you?
Well, you can't grow concrete.
You can. See you, Cameron. Cheerio. That was Cameron.
And none of this is helped by literal climate change denial being represented on TV as if it's still a valid part of the conversation. Here we have Piers Morgan talking to a climate activist for the first half of a segment, and then for the other half, someone named Naomi Sight. Naomi is a 20-year-old woman with no scientific background who reckons all of these silly scientists, 99% of peer-reviewed scientists, haven't done their research.
And after a while, I came to the conclusion that, in fact, most of the claims made by the IPCC are not really based on scientific research at all.
They just drew the graph like it was a game of pin the tail on the fucking donkey. Now, we're going to play a little game. Who do you think is behind the anti-Greta Thunberg Naomi Sight? Is it a people-led grassroots movement fed by genuine concern for the scientific consensus behind climate change being inherently flawed? Or is it a think tank funded by the Koch Brothers?
Place your bets now! Come on, quick, bet! Betting ends!
Naomi is backed by the Heartland Institute, which is based in Illinois and specialises in keeping Daddy Billionaire happy and continuing to sit on his piles of money. Back in the 90s, they spearheaded a campaign in collaboration with tobacco company Philip Morris to try and convince the world that smoking isn't bad for you. So having her take up half of this fucking TV segment is like having a debate class in school in which the controversial subject is whether you should be serving asbestos sausages in the school canteen, and 99 students are sat on the no side, but there's one kid on the yes side whose dad has investments in both asbestos mines and cancer meds, but he's still given 50% of the floor time. And given the fact that this woman is funded by the world's wealthiest oil billionaires, you would have thought that they'd be able to send her a nice DSLR and a mic or something. At least.
Hello everyone, my name is Naomi Sight and I am a new member at the Heartland Institute. And I've got very good news for you. The world is not ending because of climate change. I don't want you to panic. I want you to think.
What the fuck was that sound effect at the end? Was that your attempt at a Vine boom to capture the youth? Hey there, fellow kids. You like Vine? Is Vine still a thing?
Hello, I am Naomi Sight. And I am the anti-Greta Thunberg. Climate crisis? More like climate crisis.
Bruh.
Oh, and she's been peddling vaccine disinformation and COVID denial too, and has been caught being anti-Semitic, of course. So, how did we get in this massive fucking mess? Look at this graph. Every time I do it makes me laugh. These ultra-conservative think tanks don't even have to fully convince a portion of the population that the science is flawed to be able to succeed in their campaign. All they have to do is create doubt in enough people's minds that they get overwhelmed by the conflicting information, become exhausted and disengaged from the subject, and then fall back on the easiest course of action, which is carrying on smoking or ignoring climate change.
Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old girl with autism becoming the face of all this and screaming abuse at adults and terrifying kids, an important issue, but it's not end of the world stuff in the way that she's portraying it.
If you actually look at the history of the human race, we've actually lived through a bit of an ice age. We had nothing to do with that.
The efforts of think tanks like this and by oil corporations themselves over the last 30 years have catastrophically slowed down any progress to move away from fossil fuels. And I'm not going to go into the absolutely demonic actions of ExxonMobil here, but it can be summed up with 2 words: deny, delay. They did this by lobbying politicians to block any regulations and with advertising campaigns denying the science for the public. The science that they themselves had known was true since 1957 and covered up. In 2009, British climate scientists had their university servers hacked, and passionate climate deniers spent hours and hours poring through the thousands of leaked emails to try and find damning evidence of a global warming hoax. They managed to pull a total of 5 sentences out of these emails, which sounded bad out of context, and the powerful billionaire-owned right-wing tabloid press plastered them across pages for the world to see, and that scandal was dubbed ClimateGate. The Charles Koch Foundation and other oil barons funded a full analysis of the data that the scientists used to make the graph, and they came to the exact same conclusion that the scientists did, that the planet is heating at an alarming rate and is anthropogenic. L. During ClimateGate, oil magnates got so excited they ripped their fucking dicks off, and a few days after the email leak set up the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which was another think tank to lobby politicians into doing nothing about it. And if you look at their website on the Wayback Machine, you can see that they had a graph displayed prominently on their main header, apparently showing that the planet is not heating, helpfully ignoring all of the data that comes before this graph. And when things really went to shit in the years after this graph, they quietly removed it. And this is the oldest pathetic trick in the book for climate deniers. Zoomed in graph data. Looking at you, Stephen Crowder. So even though it's thoroughly debunked, due to climate change denial being given undue attention in the press for a false sense of balance, many of our beloved conservative pundits have soaked up these comforting talking points, not wanting to accept that undermining capitalism just a teeny weensy little bit could be what's needed for us all not to perish on a fiery ball of death.
Basically, Juliet, they won't be happy until we're crawling around in caves in loincloths.
So what do? They focused on zoomed-in graph data or cherry-pick predictions scientists have made in the past, which have turned out not to be true, ignoring the massive fucking prediction that has come true.
What scientists are telling us now is that the threat of an ice age is not as remote as they once thought.
Anyone who denied the idea of a coming ice age were denying what? What? Scientific consensus.
Ice is bad in that one.
Yeah, well, ice is bad in that one.
We are told that this crisis, this alleged climate change emergency, is man-made. There's no evidence to prove that.
We're subjected once again to the scientific models of all these maniacs who like to predict things, most of which have not come true. We're part of what you might describe as the great kind of deception.
There's the NASA photograph last August of the ice cap, the northern ice caps. And there is the NASA photograph this year of the ice caps. It is increased by 60%.
We've demonized CO2, the great evil potion.
And now we have people like Lembit Opik on GBBs, a man who has absolutely no scientific background and famous for dating one of the fucking cheeky girls, shouting about how we shouldn't worry because Carbon's actually good for the plants. Seriously, we could be in the epicenter of a fucking nuclear disaster of Chernobyl magnitude, and everyone's skin could be melting off, and Lembitopic would be there like, what do you mean this evil potion, radiation, which cures cancer? Some of them just went full-on conspiracy. I don't think there's any saving those ones, but they did pretty well in America.
A treaty will be signed. Your president will sign it. I have read that treaty, and what it says is this, that a world government is going to be created.
Even all of the oil companies in the world have now agreed on this and accepted that humans are the cause. Nevertheless, they will lobby against regulation, and the reactionaries will agree with them. And this is the main problem that faces us. So there's a few angles that these billionaire boot-licking fuckwits take, like saying there are less deaths now from climate change related disasters than ever before.
I think the figure is in the region of 90% drop in the fall in the number of more people on the planet, and yet fewer people now die from extreme weather events than they ever did.
But we've always had bad weather, Laura. But bad weather used to kill people in the millions. It doesn't anymore.
Deaths from natural disasters are at an all-time low. They've declined by 90% around the world. They've declined by 99% in places like Bangladesh.
The actual reality is fewer people are dying from climate-related incidents now than in the history of the human race. Just go to the internet and have a look at a credible source on that.
Here goes Lembit again, telling me to do my own cheeky little bit of research. He's even brought his own cheeky little graph this time. So here we have the study from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the second largest clothing and textile importer to the UK after China. They've been ravaged by carbon emissions caused by the global north to such an extent that they have suffered floods, cyclones, droughts, tidal surges, tornadoes, earthquakes, river erosion, waterlogging, rising water, and soil salinity. But hey, it's okay, because guess what? There are less deaths now because capitalism helped them develop cyclone warning systems and storm shelters. I'm not kidding, this is exactly what they're talking about when they go on about there being less deaths, because it's the one single pathetic stat that they can point to back up their insane worldview. It's like walking up to a Bangladeshi and saying, I'm sorry about your crop yields perishing to the elements, causing your famished children to starve and your business disintegrating in a horrific tornado, but at least capitalism innovated a little alarm to tell you it's happening, and a steel reinforced hut for you and your family to cower in whilst you watch your home float into the ocean. Now get back to work in that slowly crumbling factory. Those £1 Primark t-shirts aren't going to sew themselves together, are they? My little Logan needs his Santa's little helper vest so he can wear it on Christmas Day, until he vomits blended parsnips down it and we immediately throw it into landfill. And that's not to mention that actually an estimated 1 in 5 worldwide deaths are now caused by breathing in carbon, which leads to aggravating asthma, lung cancer, heart disease, strokes, and early death. But the conservatives that do agree that it's happening and at an alarming rate and will cause mass death and starvation and the lot, seem to have accepted it because they believe that there is a free market solution to it. And this is a simple carbon tax, which has been tried in Australia and catastrophically failed. It did reduce emissions by 9%, but people's electric bills rose by $10 per week. So it polled extremely negative and it got repealed in 2013. And it's been politically catastrophic in a lot of other countries too. And what's more, it doesn't even begin to address livestock methane, landfill emissions, or deforestation. And the fucking devil incarnate ExxonMobil even supported a carbon tax, which tells you everything you need to know. Here's one of their executives caught on camera admitting why they supported a carbon tax.
Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans. And the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that. A carbon tax isn't going to happen.
But the other free market take is that we should just do nothing. And this is what takes us to our favourite guy, Ben Shapiro!
Yeah, you effing with some wet-ass flood risk. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass bouts of heavy rain.
And if you're asking a family in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa not to use carbon-based emissions because you are worried about climate change in 100 years, while they are worried about literally their children dying, he found in his research that the Paris Accords would have done nothing about global temperature. He said, if we measure the impact of every nation fulfilling every promise by 2030, the total temperature reduction would be 0.048 degrees Celsius by 2100.
So Ben argues that we should, hypothetically, let capitalism do its thing, let the poorer nations develop because they're worried about their kids being fed, ignoring the fact that the consequences would be infinitely worse for them if we just do nothing. I agree with him in the sense that the Paris Agreement didn't promise to do enough, but if these promises were kept, at least we'd have a fighting chance. These agreements are just greenwashed circle jerks designed to make it look like governments are doing something when all they're really doing is keeping oil billionaires happy. But if we take a look at the study Ben is referencing here, Bjorn argues that the Paris Agreement was not enough and provides all of the figures. But what's his free market solution? It's not doing nothing, Ben. It's investing more money into green energy research and development to make it cheaper than coal, oil and gas, which would be a wonderful, nice, cushy solution that would keep both the billionaires and the proletariat happy if it would work. The trouble is, none of the billionaires are going to invest in green R&D over oil if the return is not fast enough. The billionaires seem to have decided that funding propaganda campaigns to tell the public that climate change is nothing to worry about, then turning to blame the consumer, will get them a much quicker return, and that's the problem. Benny Shapiro boy is taking part in this propaganda. It's a much safer, risk-averse option than investing in R&D projects, which quite often fail in the long run. And that's not to mention that R&D is part of the Paris Agreement anyway. It's just not the only thing, because they know it won't be quick enough. But this is what happens when you get a capitalist grifter that knows nothing about science talking shit that fits his worldview.
I do not consider it a quote-unquote emergency if the climate were to warm 4 degrees Celsius over the course of the next century. All of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
Oil companies like to make it look like they're trying to fix the problem this way, but they literally spend more screaming about how great they are at investing in green energy than they do actually investing in it. Just 1% of their investments go to green energy. It's quite simply not profitable enough in comparison to fossil fuel right now. Take it away, Katie Porter.
Well, according to your annual report, you said you're going to spend 16 to 17 billion for oil, gas, and chemical. Another $3 billion for marketing. In your testimony, you said, quote, meeting the demand for reliable energy while simultaneously addressing climate change is a huge undertaking. And one of the to spend $6 billion between 2017 and 2020 on renewable energy. How much of that did Shell actually spend? The answer is about half. Does this look like a huge undertaking to you?
Google actually tried the R&D approach, investing millions into a green energy project, which they abandoned because they realized that it would not be profitable quickly enough to compete with oil. And how did Fox News report this? Google engineers say renewable energy won't solve climate change, which is just a complete, wonderful butchering of facts to fit their narrative. And another tactic which has been shoved down our throats for the past 2 decades is personal responsibility.
Look at your carbon footprint, you'd better plant a tree. Look at your carbon footprint, not this fire in the sea.
The great political transition of the past 50 years, driven by corporate marketing, has been a shift from addressing our problems collectively to addressing them individually. In other words, it has turned us from citizens into consumers. It's not hard to see why we've been herded down this path. As citizens, joining together to demand political change, we are powerful. As consumers, we are almost powerless. In 2003, BP started a campaign which introduced the word carbon footprint into the public lexicon.
What size is your carbon footprint?
The carbon footprint's there. That I don't know.
Whatever it is, the whole population of the world, make that a very, very big number.
How much carbon I produce? Is that it?
You mean the effect that my living has on the earth in terms of the products I consume?
With this ad campaign, BP successfully removed itself from the conversation. Today, they have an online calculator so that the consumer can measure exactly how fucking guilty they should feel to multiple decimal points. So all of this consumer blame rhetoric led to the eco-consumerism movement, which serves to allow people to feel like they've done their bit, move on with their lives and forget about it. Now we end up with TV segments about how to reduce our carbon footprints.
This cup is not only a reusable cup, it's made from reusable cups.
Ooh, a cup made out of cups.
The equivalent of one garbage truck of plastic is dumped in the sea every minute.
Bring your own containers.
17.6 billion pounds every year.
Don't start buying plastic bags in the supermarkets.
The greatest oil spill in American history now covers 29,000 square miles, the size of South Carolina.
There's no excuse for us not to be using our bag for lives.
The latest on the search for 11 missing crewmen from a spectacular oil rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico. This morning, dozens of survivors have returned to their families in Louisiana, while far offshore, the rig is still burning out of control.
So using this is completely unforgivable.
Plastic companies manipulate us via their little cryptic symbols into thinking most of the plastic we use is magically eaten up by a machine and spat out into something new if we just stick it in a separate bin, when in reality 90% of it was not recycled and a lot of that ended up in the sea. And it works because you'd probably use less of it if you had one very small bin in your kitchen labelled recycling and another very, very large bin labelled whale's stomach. Mr. Beast's Team C's project aims to take 30 million pounds of plastic from the ocean over the space of 3 years. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm about to shit all over this too. We put that much plastic into the sea every 15 hours. Mr. Beast is removing less than 0.01% of plastic in the ocean. I'm sorry to talk shit on the golden boy of the internet, but that money would be better spent upstream, literally, like funding R&D into plastic alternatives. But that's not as glamorous and tangible as the idea of literally taking it out of the ocean to save the world. This mentality was exacerbated in the 90s by the UK's £7 million Are You Doing Your Bit political campaign.
Turning down the heat by just 1 degree slows down global warming and saves energy.
Call 0345 247 347.
The campaign was eventually deemed a failure. Consumers are getting too many messages, slightly conflicting messages from too many different sources, and they cannot pick up what the really big issues are. Funding for these kinds of campaigns were quietly cut in 2004. During the campaign, road traffic increased by nearly 8% in Britain, and domestic energy and consumption almost 7%. Carbon dioxide emissions also rose. America had a similar campaign called Keep America Beautiful, funded by the very companies making the litter, Pepsi and Coca-Cola. And the pushing of this ideology is still a talking point by rabid reactionary commentators who are just salivating for a chance to own a lib on live TV. And environmentalists just don't know how to respond to it.
There's so much we could be doing every single day.
I'm a carpenter.
A carpenter, right. So how safe is that for the climate?
At what point do you lead by personal example?
When are you going to give up?
And in your
TV?
house, for example,
I'm doing as much as I can. Little I can do, but
with the right kind of car and trying to less travel by air and things like that.
We don't buy single-use plastic. We've changed our diet. We only buy local and seasonal food. We go to independent shops.
We're just asking people to make small changes in their life.
Do you think collective responsibility overrides individual responsibility in a huge issue like that?
No. You block the road and stop ordinary people getting to work, some of whom, by the way, were delivering home insulation.
Yeah, quite.
Now, how do you justify that?
How is that saving the planet exactly? Queuing up from your protest and going to McDonald's, which is the #1 purveyor of fast processed beef in the world,
about the real issue
and getting it out of a cardboard and carton box.
They also love blaming China and India because they're the largest polluters, whilst forgetting that our rabid consumerism for cheap plastic goods is driving their development right now.
Yeah. India and China are polluting like hell.
Okay,
right?
let me answer
And they
this
are
one.
a far bigger issue.
Instead of virtue signalling here, why don't you talk about China? You don't want to talk about China.
And if the Extinction Rebellion group really want to make a change, they should maybe target the Chinese embassy and glue themselves to the railings there.
What I don't see is Greta going to China or India.
The top 5 polluters, India, China, Russia, Japan and America, they're the ones that pollute the most at the greatest percentage, but actually not involved in this.
We're the ones who got them there. We need to lead the movement to get them out. Nothing's going to change there until it changes here. The average British consumer causes around 3 times more CO2 than someone in India, and more than 50 times someone in Malawi. I'm not saying we shouldn't be trying to reduce our personal carbon emissions. We should be doing everything we can, but we shouldn't be blaming ourselves for needing to drive a car to our job or using single-use plastics. It's impossible. We're living in a rigged system. We're all hypocrites until we literally start living an anarcho-primitive lifestyle in caves with a bunch of cats.
Stop to put many animals into a cave.
And even then, we'd probably have to have a cap and trade on the cats. A cat and trade. It's like we're literally in an abusive relationship with oil barons, and we need to independent woman, girl boss, gatekeep, gaslight our way out of this. We need to stop talking about how we felt bad for not using public transport that one time and start talking about how fucking pissed off we are that the people who are in power are doing fuck all about this. Just stop going on TV and telling people to not have a dog, you fucking idiots!
Behind that loving cat or dog that we have, there's a whole ocean of cruelty.
COP26. More like Flop 26. The IPCC's Paris Agreement aimed to keep warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. That's what is absolutely needed for a 50% chance of avoiding a crucial tipping point. So, what's the tipping point? Here is what we know. We know that our lives are entirely dependent on complex natural systems. The atmosphere, ocean currents, the soil, the planet's webs of life. People who study complex systems have discovered that they behave in consistent ways. It doesn't matter whether the system is a banking network, a nation state, a rainforest, or an Antarctic ice shelf. Its behavior follows certain mathematical rules. In normal conditions, the system regulates itself, maintaining a state of equilibrium. It can absorb stress up to a certain point, but then it suddenly flips. It passes a tipping point and then falls into a new state of equilibrium, which is often impossible to reverse. Human civilization relies on current equilibrium states. But all over the world, crucial systems appear to be approaching their tipping points. If one system crashes, it is likely to drag others down, triggering a cascade of chaos known as systemic environmental collapse. This is what happened during previous mass extinctions. That's why it's absolutely vital that we keep under that 1.5 degrees of warming. To be able to have a 50% chance of avoiding this crucial tipping point, we need to retire 89% of proven coal reserves, 58% of oil reserves, and 59% of fossil methane, or natural gas reserves. If we want better odds than 50-50, we'll need to leave almost all of them untouched. Since the Paris Agreement, the UK has given £3.2 billion in subsidies to oil and gas companies. The world's largest 60 banks invested $3.8 trillion into fossil fuel companies, and some of that will be your ISA money and your pension money. And last year, the UK offered 113 new licenses to corporations to explore our oil reserves. Joe Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement after Trump left it and pledged to pause all new leases for oil and gas drilling. But he was sued by 14 Republican states, so he backed down, and now leases for drilling in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico are being bid on by oil corporations once again. Joe Manchin gets the deciding vote on whether Biden can pass any climate legislation into law, and he's basically a modern-day coal baron who called Biden's climate agenda very, very disturbing. Germany is still developing new coal deposits, even though their promise to abandon coal by 2038 means that they'd have to abandon the mine before it's even in full production. There are 10 to 20 billion barrels of oil still available in our North Sea, and we're planning to extract a hell of a lot more of that out. These are all empty promises. But all of the attention was on India and China, who softened their language at the last minute, saying they'd promised to phase down coal rather than phase out. So it's safe to say, even though the Glasgow Climate Pact was progress, it was nowhere near enough, and countries will almost definitely break these promises anyway. Insulate Britain are literally going for the lowest hanging fruit, something that was promised to us and we voted for and is killing people right now in our country, and they're not even doing that. They promised in 2019 that they would spend £6.3 billion on energy efficiency for homes, and we've seen none of it yet. They pissed £37 billion up the wall on a failed test and trace system last year. For just $161 billion, a fraction of the money that the government spend on supporting fossil fuels, they could buy out and shut down every coal plant on Earth. If they did so as a part of a just transition, they would create more employment than they destroy. For example, research by Oil Change International suggests that the UK could generate 3 jobs in clean energy for every 1 lost from oil and gas. Global climate inaction due to capitalist incentives has now brought us to the very brink of the tipping point, and this will cause record heat waves and droughts in poor countries, leaving them with water shortages, unable to grow crops to feed themselves or livestock, and with nothing to sell. These countries are already experiencing extreme adverse weather events. Islands and coastal regions will flood. Water will eventually become more valuable than oil. So what are the people in these countries going to want to do? They're going to want to migrate to countries who are developed enough to have the resources to deal with it. So you might be thinking, the people in power know what's going to happen and their own voters hate immigration. So why aren't they actually doing anything? Well, they do have a solution. Capitalism's solution. Have you ever noticed how the colossal carbon curb stomp of the military is never included in these talks? Why don't presidents fight the war? Why do they always send the poor?
Speaker Pelosi, you just presided over a large increase in the Pentagon budget. This Pentagon budget is already massive. The Pentagon is a larger polluter than 140 countries combined. How can we seriously talk about net zero if there is this bipartisan consensus to constantly expand this large contributor to climate change, which is exempt from these conferences? Military is exempt from climate talks.
The border and surveillance industry is a worldwide industrial complex which is expected to have a total value of around $68 billion by 2025. It includes companies that you will have heard of. Just one small part of this is a company from Australia called Construct. In 2013, Australia started Operation Sovereign Borders, a military operation which either towed migrant boats back to where they came from or flew refugees back to the countries that they were fleeing without having their asylum claims even looked at. Which, by the way, is a human right when you reach a border. Some of them ended up in an offshore processing centre where refugees could stay whilst they had their asylum applications considered. Construct built and managed these processing centres. Some of them were on Nauru, a small island just northeast of Papua New Guinea. It didn't take long for men, women and children to fill up the processing centres on this small island. In the belief that their applications were being processed, many became stuck on the island for years. Conditions in the centre were quite simply inhumane. They blocked any journalists from entering the island, so any media reporting of the horrors was almost impossible. A whistleblower doctor revealed how mental illnesses were dealt with in the camp. If we take the definition of torture to be the deliberate harming of people in order to coerce them into a desired outcome, I think it does fulfill that definition. People disclose a lot of personal information, which is then recorded in notes, which are then available to non-medical people for other purposes. In other words, adults and children had been pushed to the brink, being made to live for years on the false hope that they were on their way to build a better life. In reality, the aim was to mentally exhaust them to the point where they would be forced to go back home again to their war-torn countries because it was better than being in the camp. The detainees were tortured basically until they were severely mentally impacted, would act out, and then these acts would then be recorded and used when their asylum applications were eventually considered. Dr. Young said a third of adults and children in the detention system had what he called a significant level disorder. If they were living in Australia, that would require the care of specialist medical health services. The figures only got worse as detainees stayed longer in detention. After a year, it approaches 50%. If you go on Construct's website right now, you can see a promotional video. In one of them, they boast about how quickly they were able to rebuild a camp after the exhausted residents burnt it down during a riot. Construct was worth $8 and had not commenced training when it was offered the contract by the Australian government. They're now worth $1.6 billion. This is an industrial complex which sells weapons to countries at war. It profits from the suffering of people, and it will be funded by the taxpayer. The numbers in the centre slowly dwindled down to zero after the asylum seekers had all either been sent home or taken in the US. In August this year, the IPCC released a report, Code Red for Humanity. 1 month later, Australia signed a new contract to open the centre again. Construct are just one part of what's called the Global Climate Wall. The UK has talked of plans for an offshore processing centre. The billions being spent is money not being spent on a green transition, instead going to the profits of a border, surveillance and military industry deeply tied to the fossil economy. In the UK, we spend £40 billion per year on defence and £3 billion on the climate crisis, or 0.01% of our GDP.
Another shocking fact is that Britain's military is responsible for half the government's total CO2 emissions. Despite this, the military's devastating impact on the environment won't even be on the agenda.
This is capitalism's real solution, and nobody's talking about it. So there is hope. This might all seem like doom and gloom, but in reality, COP26 did keep 1.5 degrees Celsius heating within reach. More companies than ever signed up to end coal, but we need a huge social movement to ensure our governments keep to their promises, otherwise it just won't work. Aside from the oil billionaires, I attribute a huge amount of blame to the press for the terrible amount of progress that we've made. Climate coverage has literally been called a ratings killer. We've platformed denial and personal responsibility way too much, and we haven't actually talked about how we can fix this, because it involves rocking the status quo. An analysis by the media sustainability group Albert found that cake was mentioned 10 times as often as climate change on UK TV programmes. Scotch egg received double the mentions of biodiversity. Banana bread beat wind power and solar power put together. The forefront of the message needs to be, don't blame yourself, blame the people in charge. And I know I've been slagging them off a bit, but we do need to join them. The only thing more powerful than the lobbying actions of corporate benefactors is people in their millions threatening their power by democratic action. And that's what we need to do right now, because time is of the essence. We're in an emergency. And in the long run, the only thing that will work is a worldwide wealth tax and a move away from capitalism and neoliberalism. Corporations have become too big, so big that society ends up depending on them. So when they inevitably fail because they're not subject to any constraints that their own customers need to impose on them, they get bailed out by the state and then remain more powerful than the state at the same time. Capitalism is a snake eating its own tail that keeps the rich at the top and the poor at the bottom, whilst peddling the lie that anyone could make it one day. Capitalism is one great big fucking gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss pyramid scheme.
To the next generation of dreamers, if we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
My advice is this: if you can vote Green in your next election, do it. Even threatening to do it in polls can force those in the main two parties to take on more green policies. If you can join a protest, do it. In the US, you can support the Green New Deal by writing to your state's politicians about it, or voting for politicians that support it. You can also write to your politicians anywhere in the world to pressure them into joining the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, which is an agreement many countries have already joined with the aim of stopping the extraction of fossil fuels immediately. I believe that's the only way we've got a good chance of avoiding the tipping point.
You can't emotionally connect with the truth.
Don't talk to me about emotionally. Don't lecture me about emotional connection, Mr. Norton.
So, how do we get people to emotionally connect? Honestly, I think we could probably take a few tricks from the boss babes. How do MLMs grow their numbers exponentially? Word of mouth. They talk to people that they know so that they listen and use language that appeals to their emotions to sign up. And it works. Perhaps more of a concentration on grassroots movements started by word of mouth through personal connections is what's needed. And demonstrations need to not look like Burning Man, but have one, all-encompassing catchphrase like no justice, no peace, or get Brexit done, or making America great again, and have a clear list of demands for what we're trying to achieve. Research has shown that you only need 3.5% of a population to take part in peaceful process to force a government into action. In terms of the UK population, that's 2.3527 million people. And that's exactly what Extinction Rebellion are planning in April, with that number as a target. I'm sure that if everybody knew what was really at stake here, that number wouldn't be hard to achieve. It's just getting the message across. If you take away one thing from this video, let it be this. Until you've taken some sort of political action, voted or joined a protest, please don't let them fool you into thinking you've done your bit.
So, instead, what O'Neill and his students came up with was the idea of manufactured worlds. They hold 1 million people or more each. High-speed transport, agricultural areas. Some of them would be more recreational. You could have a recreational one that keeps 0G so that you can go flying with your own wings. These are really pleasant places to live. These are ideal climates. These are shirt sleeve environments. This is Maui on its best day all year long. But these are beautiful. People are going to want to live here. Heavy industry and all the polluting industry, all the things that are damaging our planet, those will be done off Earth. We're going to build a road to space.
There's no need to panic, everyone. Uncle Jeffrey has a solution for us. Jeffrey's building us a road into space. You sustain a stable income, picking parcels in one vast interplanetary warehouse, so we can earn just enough to eat whatever mysterious pills we find on the floor, and start brawls with our colleagues over a tasty-looking rodent that just wandered into a trap. You create a friendship with a colleague who is shackled to the next shelving unit over. Over the years, using the sweet slithers of time whenever the line manager takes a break, you manage to build an unbreakable bond, as both of your hands would sometimes reach for the same Wi-Fi fleshlight on the shelving unit between you. You begin to fall in love, a feeling you'd almost forgotten. One day, you arrive at your packing station, and your friend isn't there next to you. A few minutes into your shift, you look up through the ship's cylindrical glass ceiling to see him flailing around, hopelessly panicking, suffocating to death, his glazed, dead eyeballs bursting out of his lifeless skull, his bloated body gracefully floating into the blackness of space, on a journey to become a fuck doll on a distant planet for a yet-to-be-identified alien species with 17 penises. Your line manager pops a hand on your shoulder and says, "We did what we had to do." He missed his third beep on the productivity app, bringing his production rate down to 99.3%. Years later, you have a chance meeting with Jeffrey himself. You build up enough courage to ask, "Jeffrey, I know we said we came out here to be able to burn as many fossil fuels as we like without having to worry about warming the Earth, but fossil fuels are a finite resource. The oils we're extracting from the Earth will eventually run out." And Jeffrey laughs and responds, "Oh, you naive little one. We've already got systems in place which will allow us to harness the power of the sun and give us all of the power we need." To which you reply, "But Jeffrey, why didn't we just do that on Earth then? That means there was no need to come up here in the first place." Jeffrey then docks your wages and forces you to work in a gulag cleaning dried come-off sex robots with your fingernails until you eventually die.
A cylindrical life for the upper class. Save the world by burning natural gas. Artificially fertile soil, burning non-existent space oils. Who doesn't want or shit in bags, whatever it takes. 'Cause you save the world's Jeffrey. Whatever I can do for my man Jeffrey. Nick D'Souza, Jesse, Joseph Williams, Andrew G, William Wallace, King Belly, Thomas Dizzle Young, Asia VXH, Kate Henchman, Jason Silver, Jesse Just Jess, Queen, HDH, Zach R, Larry, Martin King, Steve Durrance, Brent Andrews, Stephen, Neve Mitchell, Catherine Espel, GB, Mo Khalifa, Senor Brainwash, Scott Howard, Paul Willis Jr., Sam Murdoch, Zoe LaChance, Amanda Jones Mitch, Melissa Ferry, Milk Moonshine, Wildcat Mitch, Elias, 3 Minute Mile, Elite Clean Feet, Ender Rena, Cara Gonzalez, Sarah Marie, Nikki, Oma Johnson, Laura Doherty, Quickstopper, MJ, Avon Gale, Music is Magic, Chance Warner, Samir of the New Westminster, Sean Mahoney, Nancy Kawita, Paris, Emma Marion Lou, Emily Wrights for German, Ashen Bird, Alex